And live from a mostly dysfunctional and entirely vacant at this hour United States Capitol Complex here in Washington, D.C. This is Congressman Brad Sherman. We have another one of our telephone town hall meetings. First, a little logistics. Write down the following phone number, 855-920-0548. If for any reason we get disconnected, just dial back in at 855-920-0548. And that number will also be useful to you on January 31, the last day of the month, will be our next telephone town hall. And that's going to be a little bit different kind of town hall in that we are not going to be calling any of you. So if you want to participate in our telephone town hall at the end of the month, you have to dial in 855-920-0548, and that would be at 7 p.m. on the last day of the month. So we'll be with each other for the next hour and 10 minutes, and if you might want to submit a question for our next telephone town hall, if you do, you go to bradsherman.house.gov. That House is for House of Representatives, so it's bradsherman.house.gov. Click on Town Hall, and you can submit a question for our January 31st town hall. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with these town halls, they're just like a giant conference call. We'll have thousands of people involved. I'll speak at the beginning, and some people have submitted questions in writing. I'll answer some of those, but mostly I'll be taking questions from you. In order to get in line to ask a question, you dial *3. You'll be connected to my fine staff. If you have a personal matter, a problem with the federal agencies, you can talk to the staff about that offline. Or if you want to ask a question, they'll put you in the queue. Now, anybody from anywhere in the world can call in and listen to this town hall. There's nothing secret about it, but we're going to be taking questions only from those who live in the 32nd Congressional District. That's the South and West, San Fernando Valley, and parts of the West Side. Once again, to get in the queue, you dial *3. Now, the U.S. government was designed by people who feared excessive governmental power. They divided up into a lot of different levels, including, of course, state and local as well as federal. And that's why we're going to be joined at the bottom of the hour by Caroline Menjivar, the state senator who represents so many of us in the West San Fernando Valley. So she'll join us then, and she can focus on what's going on in Sacramento and also be helpful in dealing with any problems you're having with a state government agency. Now, I want to put in a pitch for our constituent service team. And I just want to repeat for those who may have joined us, because a lot of people are going to be joining us just in the next 5 minutes. If we've just joined, if you want to be in the queue to ask a question, you dial *3. Now, we're located in Sherman Oaks, America's best named city, right there in the West Secom building on Van Nuys Boulevard, 4 blocks north of the 4 blocks north of the 101 freeway, and just about a mile east of the 405. You can call the constituent service team at any time during office hours at 818-501-9200. And you can be connected to that team right now by dialing *3. Now, we have on the line from the constituent service team, Scott Abrams and John Alford. I want to put in a pitch for their work. Imagine a federal agency makes a mistake. It could happen, could affect you. Could be Social Security, the VA, the IRS. You have a problem? Give us a call, 818-501-9200. Talk to John or Scott. They'll work hard. They'll solve your problem. And then I, Brad Sherman, take the credit. It's an outstanding system. Now, I want to particularly, as I have in the last several town halls, focused on the passport system. The passport system is broken. It can take many months, and if you do it the normal way, to get your passport renewed. So if you've got less than 8 months left on your passport, go online and renew it now. If your travel date is coming up and you need an emergency passport visit, call our office. We can usually arrange those. And this is especially important, we're one of the very few congressional offices that are doing this. We have a special passport fair Saturday, January 27th. It's going to be right near our office at the Sherman Oaks East Valley Adult Center in room L. That's at 5056 Van Nuys Boulevard on the east side of the street, located just 4 blocks north of the 101. Don't just show up. Sign up for an appointment and see the information that you'll need to bring. And you do that by going to sherman.house.gov/passport fair. But among the things you'll need to fill out a form. They'll have copies of the form there, but wouldn't it be better to do it at home and be ready? You'll need evidence of U.S. citizenship, so your birth certificate or your old passport, or your naturalization or citizenship papers. You'll need a recent passport-style photo. Various retailers provide those with no glasses on. Take off your glasses, 2x2 photo. You'll need valid photo identification, so that's your driver's license or your current passport. And finally, you'll need to bring a credit card, check, or money order because there are fees to get passports and even a little higher fee if you want expedited processing. So join us at our passport fair, January 27th, Saturday. And I should point down that I will be there unless a quarter of the government is shut down, in which case I will stay here. And I'll get to that possibility of a government shutdown. The good news is that both the legislative branch, my staff, and the State Department will not be subject to a shutdown until February 2nd. And hopefully it won't happen then. So we will be going forward with our passport fair on January 27th. If you know anybody interested in going to the military academies, Air Force Academy, Annapolis, West Point, have them contact my office and talk to John Alford in October of their senior year of high school, 818-501-9200. Once again, this is Congressman Brad Sherman. This is our telephone town hall. You dial *3 to get in the queue if you want to ask a question. Now, if you're planning to visit Washington, call us just as soon as you know when you're coming, as soon as you get your tickets. Don't call us from your cell phone from LAX. Call us when you know when you're coming. And you want to talk to Sarah Martin or Nick Falk at 202-225-5911. That's our Washington office. Give them the most notice. They'll set you up with the best tours. We had our last telephone town hall on the 18th of December, and I described a situation where Congress had not passed and sent to the President's desk any of the 12 appropriations bills necessary to keep ordinary operations going, nor had Congress acted upon the President's extraordinary request for over $100 billion to meet emergency needs. Over 60% of that money was for Ukraine, but it also dealt with Israel, humanitarian assistance for Gaza, Taiwan, and the border. Since the 18th of December, there has been no visible progress. We continue to be at loggerheads, and we have not seen an attitude of compromise from the other side, now from the Republicans. The Senate has been able to pass, I believe it is 3 of the bills on a bipartisan basis, and the Senate might be able, on a bipartisan basis, to pass a bill for extraordinary spending on the border, Ukraine and Israel. But even if something gets through the Senate, the rhetoric out of House Republicans is extreme, and the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, has to listen to the most extreme members of the Republican caucus because the last guy didn't, and they threw him out as Speaker of the House. So we may be in a tough situation, a partial shutdown situation on the 19th of January, even more shutdowns on February 2nd. This isn't just bad for those who need government services. This is bad, of course, for those who work for the federal government, including, and this is most outrageous, for our military. Our uniformed military is going to be required to keep working, but they will not be paid on time if there's a government shutdown. Pretty outrageous. But not only does the government shut down, I'm the chief Democrat overseeing such agencies as the Securities Exchange Commission, and it gets shut down. And if that shuts down, then you don't have any initial public offerings. You don't have additional public offerings. So our big companies and our wannabe big companies aren't able to raise funds. I want to get to questions very soon. I want to mention one other issue, and that is airport noise. It is obviously outrageous for those who live particularly in Studio City, but also Sherman Oaks and Encino. There is a report from the FAA looking at an environmental assessment of their departures and their really outrageous change in departure procedures out of Hollywood Burbank Airport. You can read that report and learn how to comment on that report by going to bradsherman.house.gov/airport noise. So if you go there, you can see what this environmental report provides, and frankly, it's inadequate. And you can, and I hope a lot of people do, learn how to comment, and the comment deadline is January 24th. So you've got a few weeks. Go to the web page, see how you can make a comment, and then get a comment into the FAA on this. You can also go to that website to learn how you can report a particular incident where a low-flying plane, a perusing helicopter, or whatever has disturbed your life in a particular way. So I've covered what I can at the beginning. I know there's a lot going on in the world, particularly in the Middle East, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have some questions on that. So, Don, let's listen to the first questioner. Please, if you're going to ask a question, give us your name and what town you live in. Don?
Okay, the first question is David regarding the Middle East. David, you are on now.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for taking this call and your time and everything you do. Just as a Jewish person, I was very concerned with what happened on the 7th, and I'm even more concerned about what's going on, the bombing of Palestinian people and the high numbers of casualties among the innocent. So what can be done to bring pressure against the Israeli government to protect innocent lives in Gaza and the West Bank?
I think the U.S. is reminding effectively Israel that they have to follow the law of armed conflict. That means every time there's a bombing raid, it has to be evaluated as to what ordinance is going to be used, what is the military objective, and whether that objective warrants the risk to civilians. That being said, all the high-value targets in Gaza are hiding among the most civilians in Gaza they can find. The forces of Hamas were occupied for about 24 hours, a little less, territory in southern Israel. They weren't driven out of that so much by the Israelis. They retreated because they didn't want to battle the Israeli army in Israel. They wanted to be behind their human shields. So it's very difficult for Israel to carry on this battle. The number of casualties is horrendous. All the casualty counts commingle Hamas fighters and civilians. The best information we have from the U.S. that I talked to is about 1/3 of those who are killed are Hamas fighters, 2/3 are civilians. As warfare goes, and warfare is terrible, that's actually considered a a lower number of civilians than you would expect. This is being talked about as if it's the worst calamity in the world. It is not. We lost 500,000 people in Tigray, and I was one of the few members of Congress who was really active in that. And of course, we've seen what's happened in Syria, in Congo, to the Rohingya, and many other places where the death counts have been significantly higher, but the press coverage hasn't been there. That being said, Israel knows full well that the United States is looking at their behavior. We have criticized it on some occasions, and in some cases, the press has criticized Israel unfairly. The biggest incident by far in terms of press coverage was the Al-Ali, I believe it was, hospital, and it's now been accepted and documented by the U.S. Intel services that was a Islamic Jihad rocket that fell rather than the Israelis. So I think we all want to see an end to this fighting immediately, but we've already had a temporary ceasefire, and what we're looking for is to end the bloodshed permanently. That can't happen unless Hamas releases the hostages and relocates, probably to Iran. If instead Hamas stays in Gaza as a fighting army, they've already announced to the Arab press that they will view that as an opportunity to regroup, and then they will repeat October 7th. So that isn't a permanent ceasefire. That's just an opportunity to prepare for the next horrendous. So it is critical that Israel do everything it can, and I think they should do more to limit to civilian casualties. But ultimately, if Hamas to publicly declare that they're going to repeat this when they can means that Hamas has got to be relocated out of Gaza if we're going to have a real end to this fight. Let's go on to the next question.
Okay, Congressman, we have a question from Nick from Woodland Hills about the transit through the Sepulveda Pass. Nick, you are on now.
Yeah, hi, Congressman. Thank you for holding the town hall, and thank you for taking my question. I'm a constituent of yours in Woodland Hills. I'm a homeowner. I mentioned that only because I want to make clear that many homeowners, single-family homes in your district also are supportive of mass transit and rail options. And my question is how come you have been so vociferously kind of supportive of the monorail option as opposed to the heavy rail option?
I certainly have not.
Much more of your constituents.
Very few people.
I didn't finish my question, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the heavy rail option, which serves significantly more people, more of your constituents, which better serves UCLA as opposed to monorail, which monorail doesn't serve UCLA as a station. And then beyond that, the monorail contractor that's been considered has a problematic history in Los Angeles as a company by the name of BYD, which is a Chinese company. And I just wanted to ask that you consider the heavy rail option because of how many of your constituents will benefit from it and the improved transit times that it'll support.
Nick, my views on this have been distorted by a few people on the internet. I've been fighting for rail through the Sepulveda Pass since last century. What has held us up is that it's very expensive. And so I'm not going to judge any of these options until we have all the information, including cost. We have gotten some fragmentary information without any cost figures so far. So I remain agnostic as to which proposal. But by God, we've got to get it. We've got to get it built as soon as possible. And anybody in Congress will tell you that I've been fighting for this for more than 20 years. But the as to which system, let's get all the information. But I am aware that heavy rail will serve a few more people or will have more capacity. But there are a host of other issues, some of which cut one way, some of which cut the other. The advocates of the monorail believe that for the same money, we can get for the money that it would take to get a tunnel to Westwood, we could get a monorail all the way to LAX. And I did a survey question. We're going to do survey questions throughout this this town hall. And the most popular of all the options, but really not one that the MTA has put on the table, is if you have the money, go all and have enough money to do it, get all the way to LAX. I'm a Bruin, and I realize that a stop in Westwood over by the federal building, that's going to help people who want to go to the hospital and want to use the VA facility. But it's going to you're going to need a connector to get to UCLA, and that's going to take an extra, and we don't have the estimates on this, 5 or 10 minutes every day, each way, for every UCLA student who lives in the Valley. And not just the students who the current analysis says would be the smaller group going to UCLA, but the hospital, especially the hospital workers. So there are some real advantages to the underground approach. There may be advantages to the monorail. There are people who are so passionately dedicated to the underground that if you mention that, gee, the monorail is something we should at least get the information about, they accuse you of somehow, I don't know, being a secret traitor for the devil and the monorail, which they regard as the same thing. So it is completely false to say that I am for one or the other. And I'll tell you this, I don't get to make the decision. The MTA board makes the decision, and if they have a project and that is the only project to go forward, I am for it, and I'm for it getting as much federal money as possible. But if it wasn't for the cost element, this thing would have been built a couple decades ago. This is an expensive project, however you do it, and let's get all the information and then move forward. And look, as I say, I'm a Bruin. The UCLA very much wants a station right there, very close to the hospital, and they're passionate about that, and they don't want the students to have to be on some sort of shuttle. So, and especially the hospital workers to have to be on some sort of shuttle. So, I understand the passion. I don't understand the vilification of those who are willing to look and waiting for all the information. The good news is we should have all the information within 6 months, and then we'll be in a position. But the fact that anybody with a Twitter account can convince you that I am, dead set against a subway, that's completely false. My guess is that regardless of what I think is incrementally better, I'm for either one. If we got to get one, and even if I think one is incrementally better than the other, we got to get it done. And my guess is that the MTA staff wants to go with a tunnel, and if they convince the MTA board that that's the way to go, that will be the project, and I will do my level best to get it funded. But don't think that, it's obviously a good project, and Sherman can go get $5-10 billion for it. Doesn't matter what it costs. Whatever it costs, Sherman will get the money out of the federal government. It's not that easy. So the Valley pays an enormous amount of sales tax and has gotten roughly 1% of the grade-separated rail in the county. So we've been ripped off, and it's time we get this. We need to get it as soon as possible. We need to build it as soon as possible. Let's go on to the next question.
Okay, Congressman, we have a question from Laura from Woodland Hills concerning the supplemental package, border security, Ukraine and Israel assistance. Laura, you're on now.
Cool. Thank you, Congressman Sherman. Everybody wants a chance to be heard, and so it's really great that we have this opportunity. So thank you so much. I watched The Beat with Ari Melber, and I love it. He always provides a pretty good balance of both sides. And I recently saw Mike Johnson on there talking about the border crisis, and Ari brought up the fact that Biden has allocated, it sounds like billions of dollars, I don't know how much, but he's allocated money, and Mike Johnson doesn't seem to want to do anything with that money. Can you explain what's happening with that?
Well, I've been supporting comprehensive immigration reform for a couple of decades. We haven't really dealt with the immigration laws since the 80s. The Republicans passed their bill, very restrictive, might even violate international law, narrow definition for those applying for asylum. They passed that with, I think, zero Democratic support and no chance of passing the Senate. They are now saying that's what they want. The Biden approach is that he wants more money so that we can not only process but adjudicate these cases quicker. So if somebody claims to be eligible for asylum, instead of saying, well, Abbott's got a bus and he'll take you to Chicago and come back in 6 years and we'll decide whether you deserve asylum, that we adjudicate it hopefully immediately. So the Republicans are trying to change the standards. Biden is trying to make the existing system work. There's discussions in the Senate that involve both processes. There are some Republicans who have said the quiet part out loud, that they don't want a deal, they want the issue. And if you spend any time watching Fox News and even other outlets that are further to the right, you'll see that the pictures from the border can be made very effective advertisements against the reelection of Biden. So my hope is that, and I wish I could hope for the House. I'm a member of the House and have been for a long time, and the Senate is, the other body, the rival, whatever. But I think in this case, if we're going to get a reasonable compromise, it's going to come out of the Senate discussions, and then we're going to have to put pressure on Republican House members to accept that. But that is, it is very clear that Republicans are not going to accept Biden's proposal to efficiently enforce the laws as we have it now. And not only are they unwilling to do that, they're holding up aid for Israel, and aid for Ukraine because they don't agree with Biden's approach. Now, I mentioned survey questions, and we are going to have some so that everybody will be able to express themselves during this town hall. And so this is question A. This is one we ask every town hall because it's a question pollsters ask in every poll. Do you approve of Biden's performance as president? 1, you approve, press 2 on your phone if you disapprove, press 3 if you're unsure. And while you're taking that survey, we're going to hear from our state senator, and she is new. She just took office a year and a month ago. Caroline Menjivar, who represents not only the East Valley, but quite a number of us in the West San Fernando Valley, in Van Nuys, Reseda, Canoga Park, West Hills, Winnetka, and North Hills. She served in the Marine Corps. She was a graveyard shift EMT, and now she's been elected to represent us in the state Senate. Caroline?
Hi, Congressmember. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Congressmember, for continuing your town halls and letting me be your first guest speaker of 2024. I appreciate that. Well, hello, everyone. Like you heard, my name is Senator Caroline Menjivar, the newly elected state senator for District 20 from Canoga Park all the way to the city of Burbank. On the West Valley, we got the borders of Victory Boulevard to Nordhoff and pretty much 90% of the East Valley and then the city of Burbank. Came on here to share a little bit of what we've done in the past year and talk about what we see in 2024. Today was day 2 of session reconvening, and on the Senate side, we've introduced 11 bills. The Assembly has introduced 15, so we're starting off with 26 bills. Now, mind you, because this is the second year of the session, we have a couple of 2-year bills. I myself have a couple of 2-year bills that were still in progress from last year. Last year, I introduced 16 bills. We were dealing with a budget deficit of around $33 billion. A lot of the bills that we introduced were fortunately vetoed by the governor, and it had the same message, dealing with the budget. We want to be very mindful of that. We are now entering into a year of in the mid-$60 billion deficit for the state of California. It seems very grim, but we're very optimistic that we're going to hold the line. We're going to protect the progress of what we've been doing in California, ensuring that our most vulnerable population are getting the services that they need. I was appointed last year as chair of Budget Subcommittee on Health and Human Services, which accounts to 40% of the state's budget, anywhere from CalFresh to CalWorks to our hospitals to our skilled nursing facilities to Medi-Cal to behavioral services to child care. It's under my budget subcommittee. And last year we did so much work in terms of oversight, accountability, and ensuring we brought funding down to our districts and across the state of California. One of the things that I'm most proud about is implementing the CalFresh augmentation for families of 1 to 2 who right now only get approximately $23. I was able to get into the budget to increase that to $50 a month. Not enough, but it was a big win given our budget. We're going to be choosing a demographic across the state of California to have their CalFresh go up to $50. We do a lot of accountability over the new program that started in LA County just this past December, the Care Corps program, that is going to be looking at addressing our most vulnerable people who are experiencing homelessness with mental illnesses, who are experiencing episodes of schizophrenia and so forth. We're going to be looking under the subcommittee, ensuring that LA County is doing the work that they need to be doing to have the beds available, that they're utilizing the $15 million seed money that we gave them for the purposes of Care Corps. I will be having a separate town hall on Care Corps later this month to talk more about that. I am a social worker by tour.
Senator, do you know when and where that town hall will be?
Yes, we're looking at the end of this month. I wanted to see. We don't have a date just yet. It's just a hold for right now.
Gotcha.
We can definitely get back to you.
And Senator, I got to sneak in one other question. As a lot of people have problems dealing with state agencies, could be employment or unemployment insurance, could be the DMV. If they have a problem and want to reach your office to deal with it, how do they reach you?
Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up, right? So what do state senators do? Well, we work to be we're your liaisons for state departments, especially during the pandemic. People were filing unemployment cases left and right. So we help you with your taxes that are coming up. We're going to be hosting a tacos and taxes event in Canoga Park, which will be coming up soon. You can reach out to my Van Nuys office at 818-901-5588 and speak to the representatives there. You can email our office at Senator Menjivar, MENJIVAR, at sen.ca.gov to get more information about which district rep represents you. But we can help you on DMV, taxes, unemployment, anything to do with your board. If you're in cosmetology, if you're in mental health services, your board is under the state, and we can help you with that. You have an idea on legislation, you can send that over to us. You have an opinion on the legislation, you can share that with us. You want to provide a comment on the legislation that we're going to be seeing, you can reach out to us on that. And I wanted to share before, I know I don't have a lot of time, but our 4 staple events every year, well, we'll be going into our second year. We do Pride in June as the only LGBTQ individual in this area to represent in any levels of government. I take pride in hosting this event in the San Fernando Valley. We have our annual Veterans Day event as a Marine Corps veteran that's really near and dear to my heart. We do a Power of Herfluence event to uplift young girls and women. And then we have our holiday events. So please stay tuned for those staple events that we'll have in the community to ensure you come out and join us. Congress member, I don't know how much time we have left, but
we do need to move on, but
there
I
we
want
go.
to thank you.
So
You've
much.
obviously done an awful lot in just 1 year, and I look forward to working with you more. And I know your constituents who are on the line will look forward to both those events and calling your office if they have a problem with a state agency. At this point, I want to announce the results of our question about Biden. 67% of you approve, 23% disapprove, 10% are unsure. That is infinitesimally worse for the president than our last town hall on December 18th, where it was 70% approve, 22% disapprove, and 8% unsure. Oh, and let me remind people, dial *3 if you want to be in the queue to ask a question. Now, people had a chance to submit questions in advance, and of course, if you want to submit a question in advance for our January 31 town hall, you go to bradsherman.house.gov. Eric Steinhauser of Encino asks, what are we doing to increase our military investment to keep up with China and not let them bypass us? And what are we doing to limit or reduce U.S. corporate investments in China? First, the military side of this, we are spending a tremendous amount already on our defense. We spend way more than China does. In fact, about 3 times as much. And we spend 3.5% of our GDP on our defense. That is more than double what China spends of its defense. And that 3.5% doesn't include our veterans benefits, which of course is a very important way in which we compensate our men and women in uniform. If you do the correct accounting would be to include the veterans benefits, in which case we're spending 4.6% of our GDP on defense. And if there is, we have our aircraft carriers off their coast. They don't have their aircraft carriers off Long Beach or Malibu. I do support the Accelerating Arms Transfers to Taiwan Act and all the things we're doing for Taiwan, because if they can defend themselves, China won't attack and we won't have a war. As to the investments, keep in mind that China invests far more in the U.S. than we invest in China, but they tend to buy bonds, which are just loans to the U.S. government or companies. We invest in Chinese stocks, which do a lot and that kind of investment can drive innovation, growth, and business expansion far more than an investment in bonds. I have 3 proposals that I'm putting forward this year just to deal with this. The first would be to say that you can't have index funds or these low-cost mutual funds invest in China because there are such unique difficulties in understanding an investment in China that should only be done very carefully, not paid by the numbers. Second, that every major company would have to report to its shareholders what risk they have because of their involvement in China and what they're doing to alleviate that risk. This is designed to inspire them to decouple their economic activity with China. And the third is a bill to eliminate the capital gains special tax allowance for investments in China or Russia or Belarus or North Korea, for that matter. And the capital gains allowance it provides a significantly lower tax on money made on profits on stocks, and it's justified, and I'm not sure whether it's fully justified, but it's justified on the basis that it encourages building the economy. Well, maybe we should provide tax incentives to build our economy. It's hard to see why our current tax law provides incentives to build the Chinese economy. And this is also fair because China has its tax laws, and those tax laws encourage the Chinese to invest in China and do not provide the same benefits for investing in the United States. So it's not only the logical thing for us to do, it's the fair thing for us to do. So I do think that China is going to be a story this whole century for the United States, and happy to respond to Eric's question. With that, we're going to do another survey question, then take a question from the floor. This is survey question B. In your view, who carries the greatest responsibility for the war, Israel or Hamas? So if you think that the greatest responsibility for this conflict is in the hands of Hamas, press 1. If you think Israel is responsible for this war, press 2. If you think they're both more or less equally responsible for this war, press 3. And if you're unsure, press 4. Now let's take a question from the floor.
Okay, Congressman, sticking with China, Nancy from Palisades has a question about the South China Sea. You should be on now.
Hi, Congressman Sherman. Good evening.
Good to be with you.
Thanks very much for taking our calls. I have a question about the issue of Taiwan and the growing conflict, as I think I see it, between what's going on in the South Seas, between the jockeying positions of the Chinese military exercises and also our presence there. And I think the Chinese have a very specific view on Taiwan and may be using this issue now. It's kind of an inflection point for it. I wondered what your views are on this topic.
I support giving Taiwan the ability to defend itself and defend the current situation. I don't support encouraging Taiwan to declare independence. That would be waving a red flag, at a red cape at the Chinese bull. I do think that we need to tone down the rhetoric if we can, and tone down our freedom of navigation. Just because we have the legal right to put an aircraft carrier 12 miles off the Chinese coast doesn't mean we should. And imagine if you saw an aircraft carrier, a Chinese aircraft carrier, when you went to the beach. So there are things we can do to cool things down. What worries me is what China will do if its government feels that it is losing the support of its people on economic issues. The last refuge of any scoundrel in politics, in statesmanship, is supranationalism. and the Chinese Communist Party really can't explain why they should be running things. They are they took power by being the vanguard of the proletariat, but they are not the vanguard of the proletariat. They're certainly less. They've lost their interest in communism, and that is an ideology. So they've delivered extraordinary economic growth, and as long as they do that, they won't face major. They won't face a risk of regime change. But if their economy slows down, people are going to start asking, well, why are those guys running things? And if their answer is because we will lead you to success in a war against Taiwan, that would be a terrible answer. So I'm concerned, and I think that the Ukraine has demonstrated not only to Russia but to China that you can't just try to conquer a territory, even if it used to be part of your country, against the will of its people. With that, we'll go to a survey question on China. What, in your view, is the most serious problem with China? I'll go through these first. One will be China's policy on human rights, the Uyghurs and how it treats its own dissidents. Number two, China's military power, the South China Sea and Taiwan. Three, the economic competition that China provides, including our very large trade deficit. And four, press four if you just don't see a major problem with China. And press five if you're unsure. Now, I realize this is tough because some people will want to just choose all of the above, but I will ask you to decide which you think is the greatest problem. 1, for human rights. 2, military. 3, economic. 4, you just don't see a problem at all. 5, unsure. And as to the last question, as to who's responsible for the war, 57% say Hamas, 18% say the Israeli government, 20% say both, and 5% say unsure. With that, let's go to the next. Actually, let's get in another write-in question because it does relate to the survey question, Israel and Hamas. This is from Walana Daoud from Reseda. Asks, why are you sponsoring the Peace and Tolerance in Palestinian Education Act? The Constitution doesn't support it. It's clear you're being lobbied. Why do you make legislation happen so fast for your Jewish constituents but not for the rest of us? Let me take that in turn. The Constitution clearly allows us, what this bill does is just to put this in context, a UN agency known as UNRWA funds all the education on the West Bank and Gaza, or almost all of it. The biggest donor to UNRWA is the United States. The textbooks and curriculum that UNRWA uses teaches support for terrorism. For example, it glorifies Dalal Mughrabi, who in 1978 killed 38 Israeli civilians on a coastal road, including 13 children. So all the bill does is require a report to Congress as to whether Palestinian education has been reformed. That's a pretty modest bill, and obviously the First Amendment does not require the United States to finance education in foreign countries that teaches the glorification of terrorism on some sort of First Amendment basis. The next part of the question, it's clear you're being lobbied. Yeah, I'm lobbied all the time. People on this call, including the person who posed this question, are trying to suggest that I do this or do that. it then says, why do I make the legislation happen so fast? Unfortunately, I didn't make it happen fast enough. I introduced this bill in 2019. We've passed it through the House because this war has demonstrated how important it is that we see peace and tolerance in the Middle East, and that starts with an educational system that does not glorify terrorism, at least not financed by the United States. And then the final part of the question is, am I doing this for my Jewish constituents? And frankly, there isn't everybody on this call, including Jewish or Gentile, would be much happier right now if we had seen peace and tolerance in Palestinian education over the last 20 years. And we had not seen the explosion of violence on October 7th. So if we didn't have a war in the Middle East, that would be better for all of us. And even for those not concerned with world affairs, just the Houthi attacking ships going through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal has raised gasoline prices around or made gasoline prices higher than they would be around the world. So even if you're not focused on foreign affairs and your heart isn't touched by the tragedies that we've seen in the Middle East, it affects your pocketbook as well. So this is not something I'm doing just for the Jews who live in my district. With that, let's take a question from the floor.
Okay, Congressman. We have a question from George, who has a question about the national debt.
Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
My name is George from Northridge, and my question is that the U.S. national debt has reached $34 trillion, and you as a House of Representative, would anybody ever sit down in Washington and talk about how to reduce that $34 trillion debt? And my second question is, why do you oppose Bitcoin and digital assets?
Okay, that's two questions. Everybody else can only ask one question. I'll respond to both of your questions. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We need to try to reduce the national debt, or at least prevent it from increasing. Most economists would say that if the increase is limited to 3% of GDP, that our economy can absorb that, but obviously we've done far worse than that over the last several years. We have to look at every expenditure and pare it down if that can be done. And I fought to reduce what I thought were unnecessary expenditures. And we have to deal with revenue. And Republicans will often talk about the debt, and then anything you do with revenue, they try to sabotage. We have to enforce the tax laws we have now. We're losing $1 trillion every year, according to the IRS commissioner appointed by Donald Trump, because the IRS doesn't have the resources to audit the large corporations and wealthy individuals. So we provided a money, $8 billion a year for 10 years for the IRS to focus on that. That would produce way more than the amount of money we're spending, because first, the auditors collect money from the people they audit. Second, once somebody's audited, even if you don't audit them the next year, you've inspired them to comply. And then third, you create a general atmosphere in the country that, hey, you got to report all your income, and everybody else is reporting all their income, and you're not a sucker for reporting all your income. I'm the only CPA in the House on the Democratic side. I co-chair of the CPA caucus. I used to head the second largest tax agency in the country. And I know that the money that we fought for and that Republicans are trying to take away for the IRS will pay for itself a dozen times over. As to Bitcoin, there's a short-term and a long-term problem, and not just Bitcoin, but all the hamster coin and cobra coin. I, in a hearing, said, God, we got a hamster coin and a cobra coin, but we don't have a mongoose coin. Somebody created a mongoose coin within hours of when I said that. It is kind of crazy. But there's a couple of problems. First is that the U.S. dollar is an excellent currency, except if you're trying to hide things from the federal government. And that goes back to the first thing. The biggest market for a new currency, and these cryptocurrencies aren't currencies yet. They aspire to be currencies. If they're successful, they will become currencies. You'll actually able to buy things with them, and not just one isolated case. I know that there's somebody who sold a sandwich once for Bitcoin, but it was like a publicity stunt. If it ever becomes a currency, then your ability to hide from the IRS will be so much better that the only people who will pay income tax are those who do it voluntarily and figure, well, the government couldn't catch me, but, I just want to be honest. Or it will be wage earners. Wage earners will have to pay on every penny they make because they get a W-2 form. Everybody, but the very wealthy, they'll pay what they choose to pay. That would devastate us in terms of revenue. The other thing, though, is the reason why our deficit hasn't sunk us already is because of the role the U.S. government's currency, the dollar, plays in international as a reserve currency and as an international mechanism of exchange. You even see Argentina thinking of adopting the U.S. dollar as its currency, which would benefit us. The proponents of cryptocurrency are very honest in their plans. They're not only very honest in their business dealings. I mean, Sam Bankman-Fried's in jail and ought to be, but they're very honest in their aspiration, and that is that cryptocurrencies will displace or partially displace the U.S. dollar as the international reserve currency. If that happens, then even if we don't increase the deficit, the fact that we have this debt will be terrible for the U.S. economy. And everybody from Brad Sherman to Tucker Carlson, if you used to watch him, understands that anything that displaces the U.S. dollar's role in international affairs will cost the average American family many thousands of dollars in higher interest costs, will cost our country tremendously in terms of its international power. And given the fact that we have this huge deficit, could sink the whole economy. So we have to make sure that the dollar retains its role in international affairs, and that we can enforce our tax laws. That's why I've been the only member of Congress to get an F from the only pro-crypto organization that rates members of Congress. And I realize that that has caused some crypto billionaire bros to fund my opposition. So be it. It's the right thing. Let's take another write-in question, and this is from Jeffrey Allen of Granada Hills. When will you impeach Biden, a major crook who never had a real job? I saw you lead the impeachment of Trump. Let's see Joe Biden get impeached. My response is that it is not an impeachable offense to spend the bulk of one's life in public service. People who voted for Joe Biden knew that he had been a senator and vice president. They thought that was a good thing. As for the crook thing, obviously Hunter Biden, the son, has committed some felonies. And if Hunter Biden held federal office, I'd vote to impeach Hunter Biden. But you cannot impeach a U.S. president because of the violations of his son. As to the outcome of our last survey question, 28% think that human rights is the biggest problem. 27% think the military power is the big problem. 29% think it's the economic competition. 5% say there's no serious problem. 11% unsure. So almost identical responses for human rights versus military power versus economic power. Let's take another question from the floor.
Okay, Congressman, we have a few questions about the rise in anti-Semitism. This one's from Lana. Lana, you are on.
Hello, Congressman. Thank you so much for holding this town hall. Incredibly generous with your time. Obviously, even the survey you just conducted about who started the war suggests that there is, and as you indicated in responding to prior question, there is a lot of misinformation, which partially is the reason that leads to the rise of anti-Semitism. Partially, it's always been there, and the circumstances are such that they encourage it and engender it. As a Jewish person who comes from a family where a lot of people perished in Holocaust and who moved from Eastern Europe to the United States, it's obviously shocking to see what we're seeing now. And if we naively used to think that because we always support our neighbors and other minority groups in their fight with any kind of injustice, they would stand with us.
I'm going to ask you to get to a question because we only have another 8 minutes.
So the question is, that doesn't happen. So clearly government needs to do something. Congress needs to act as well. What do you think should happen at the congressional level to have reasonable measures in place to help fight anti-Semitism here in the United States and do so in a meaningful and impactful way? Thank you.
We have a First Amendment in the country that allows people to say terrible things, hateful things, and false things. This differs from a number of other democracies, particularly Germany. That being said, we have what has been the greatest disappointment is the anti-Semitism on campuses. Campuses are funded in large part by the U.S. government through a whole variety of ways. And we have Title VI of the Civil Rights Act that says that universities and colleges have got to make sure that there isn't a barrier to education posed to someone because of their race or national origin. And I've been fighting for many years to make sure that that provision applies to Jews and then that it's enforced. Now, as to applies to Jews, notice I said race or national origin. For many decades, the Civil Rights Agency inside the Department of Education said, well, that's not Jews, that's a religion. The fact is there is such a thing as the Jewish people. We do come from the ancient kingdom of Judea. Though the Romans displaced us almost 2,000 years ago. And so we won that battle, then lost it, then won it again. And so it is policy now that Title VI does apply to Jews on campus. But the next battle, and the one we've only partially won, is that you have to define anti-Semitism if you're going to enforce rules against it. And we still don't have a definition that says calling for the total destruction of Israel is anti-Semitic. I mean, look, if I got on this phone and said, destroy Albania, you'd probably think I was anti-Albanian. And if you say destroy the only Jewish state in the world, you're probably anti-Jewish. So there is that. We have to fight that battle. The recent testimony before Congress and the results of that, I think, regardless of whether this president or that president was or wasn't, it's clear to university presidents around the country that Title VI has got to be taken seriously, and that Jewish students need to be protected. One of the elements, and it's a crazy element on campuses, is to think that whoever's of color in anywhere around the world is morally right compared to those who are white. That's just not true. People of all ethnicities are capable of being moral and immoral. There were literally millions of people in Eastern Europe who were enslaved by the Turks and Arabs, but that was 5-6 centuries ago, and not reported in the history books very often. So every ethnicity has been on every side of morality, and it's also, even if you buy this ridiculous idea that you're going to judge people by the color of their skin, people, in the United States, they meet Jews like me, whose whose ancestors come from Eastern Europe. Israel's a different place. It's not the United States. Over half its people come and were expelled from the very Arab states, where now Arabs are saying, well, they shouldn't live in Israel. Well, why aren't they in Morocco? Because you expelled them, because you discriminated them, because you subjected them to pogroms and aggression. Maybe not as bad as faced in some European countries in some centuries, but sometimes worse. So Israel is the refuge not only of the Holocaust survivors, it is the refuge of those who were tormented, expelled, killed in Arab countries and in Iran, and who found refuge in Israel. Let's see. I guess we have time for one more question.
Okay, Congressman, we have a question from, trying to read the name here.
I'm sure they can tell us their name.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, it actually is Mel who has a question about the Supreme Court. Mel, you're on.
Well, thank you for taking me, and I just don't understand what's going on with the Supreme Court, why they're dragging their feet and not making the ballot or not. I mean, the man is terrible, Trump, and they're dragging their feet. Why?
You're talking about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment?
Yes.
I think they'll act more quickly on that than they acted on anything else of significance. Usually the Supreme Court takes years. This time I think they'll take weeks. The downside, from the point of view that you're taking, is that I think they'll come up with the wrong decision. They want to duck any responsibility for making a political decision, or being in politics, and they don't want to take the responsibility for taking Trump off the ballot, notwithstanding the fact that our Section 3 of Article 14 of Amendment 14 states that those who have engaged in insurrection against the United States shouldn't hold the federal or state office. Now, I will say this: the authors of that amendment never conceived that it would be that the office somebody that an insurrectionist might be elected to was president. They were concerned because at the time they knew that no one who had served the Confederacy would ever be elected president. So their goal was to keep such people out of the House, the Senate, the state houses, and the electoral college that selects a president. They didn't think that such an electoral college would select a Confederate, but might select somebody who was kind of pro-Confederate, a Northerner with some Southern sympathies. So they left out the words president and vice president from Section 3. That there's no logical reason for that in the 21st century, but they were dealing with the 19th century, and their problem was the Confederacy, and former Confederates had a real opportunity to achieve power, and unfortunately, for the most part, did achieve power in southern states after the Civil War. So, and in fact, the Section 3 never achieved its purpose because it allows for pardons and waivers, and unfortunately, lots of pardons and waivers were issued, and we ended up with Jim Crow instead of a real Reconstruction until over 100 years after the Civil War. So I don't know what my guess is. The Supreme Court will duck its responsibility. It will allow Trump to run. Frankly, I'd rather have Trump defeated by the electorate than by the Supreme Court. But it's dangerous to have him run. And so we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does. If he does run, he will run. He will claim he's a martyr for this reason and for every other wrongful act for which the court system and the justice system is after him. And if they throw him off the ballot, he'd probably run one of his sons and claim that he's an even bigger martyr. So I think we need to defeat Donald Trump by defeating his ideas and reminding people of just what he means for our democracy. Folks, if we go over, we have to pay our vendor a whole lot more money. So I'm going to end this in the next minute and a half. Remember, you can call 855-920-0548 at 7 p.m. on the last day of the month for our next town hall. I want to thank you for all being involved. Please stay on the line after I hang up. You'll be connected to our voicemail system. Please give me your email address, even if I already have it. I know that sounds weird, but I'm not allowed to send you any emails for the next couple of months unless I get your email address. Do join us on January 31, and unless I get it from you. Do join us on January 31. We will not be calling you, so if you want to participate, you have to call us at 855-920-0548. You can also leave on our voicemail system any expression of your opinion on any issue. I'm not going to listen tonight. It's after 11 o'clock East Coast time, but I will listen tomorrow, and I look forward to talking to you on January 31. And this building is empty. The congressional complex is empty, but I'm here getting a bit of a head start on what will be a difficult period of time for Congress. So thank you very much. Talk to you at the end of the month.